But we have to talk about the Vikings and what they've done here over the last several weeks offensively. And they've emerged by most statistical measures, traditional or some otherwise, as one of the best offenses in the NFL. Steve, are you buying that Kirk Cousins can lead a truly great and potentially Super Bowl caliber offense?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't know about Kirk Cousins all the time. He's up, he's down, but I think Kirk is one of those guys where if you surround him with the right supporting cast, I think that's kind of been the story of his career, right? I mean, I think he's had good receivers in Washington and good play callers, and he's always worked well off play action, or when he gets that high volume play action game like he has this year, you can extract good production out of him. That's how I will describe it, and I think Minnesota is doing a fantastic job of that. I love Dalvin Cook. As much as we're not supposed to like running backs at PFF, I love Dalvin Cook. I love what he brings to the table. I think I always thought he was right up there with Zeke and Todd Gurley and all these guys that people thought were the best pure runners coming out the last 3 or 4 years. So I love a lot of what Minnesota's done. And, for years people talk, the recent years it's been this McVay coaching tree, and then people kind of forgot about Shanahan, but they all forget that maybe it's Kubiak, right? That's kind of like sitting atop that. And I think we're seeing that a little bit of in Minnesota, where they're just making a lot of much better decisions, working that play action game and getting the most out of Kirk.
What do you think it is about Gary Kubiak? Like, what part of his offense is it that can always get more out of quarterbacks like Jake Plummer and Brian Greasy and Matt Schaub, and now with Cousins, where his numbers have just gone way up? It seems like, everybody else will get the label of quarterback whisperer or this or that, but here's old Gary just still out there doing it.
I think it really starts with the play action game. Even if you just watched on Sunday night, and if you're just looking at quarterback statistics and you're watching the throws that Cousins made, and this isn't to take anything away from what Cousins has done the last 4, 5, 6 weeks, but such a huge chunk of his yards were coming just off of boot action and screens, just as this baseline. So much like Andy Reid does with the Chiefs, I think a good play caller wins on the edges a little bit, runs that high percentage of play action, has a good screen game, and you just kind of get the quarterbacks to this baseline of production. And then the quarterback still has to make some throws. There'll still be some third and longs here and there. You still have to make those intermediate and downfield throws. But if you start with this baseline of production that comes from the play calling, I think Kubiak's done a really good job of that. And that whole tree does a really good job of running the outside zone scheme, running the play action off of that. And I do think the wide zone scheme just creates more holes, I think, with play action, because you just get the defense moving vertically and horizontally, and it creates a nice passing lane.
Steve, last week against Dallas, Kyle Rudolph had 2 touchdown catches, including a spectacular one-handed grab in the back of the end zone. He's now got 4 touchdown receptions in the last 4 weeks after basically being a ghost. For the first 6 being essentially an extra blocker and being told he was going to be a blocker. Are we to think that's just because Adam Thielen's been sidelined the last couple of weeks, or has he reemerged as a scoring threat?
Yeah, it's tough to, when it's just, 4 touchdowns in such a short period of time to say, okay, now he's gonna get 10 this year. But I do think, when you look at all the weapons that the Vikings have, especially when Thielen is on the field, they can attack all levels of the field. They can win in a whole bunch of different areas. I thought that drafting Irv Smith was just a really nice move to complement what Rudolph brings to the table. And I think part of it was Thielen's out, and you've got hey, let's use our big target in the red zone. Some of it's just circumstantial, but I just really like the way Minnesota has built their group of playmakers. You've got the route runners on the outside. You got the big tight end in the middle and Rudolph. You've got the shiftier, better route running tight end in Irv Smith. So I think they've done it the right way, and because you have multiple options to go to on a given play, you can go to the big guy Rudolph when things open up for him.
Talking with Steve Palazzolo of Pro Football Focus. Okay, Steve, this is weird to ask now because I've been here for a couple of years, and Mike Zimmer's defenses are always great, but can the Vikings win with a mediocre pass defense? Or do you think it gets turned around? I think that's very possible that they get hot toward the end of the year and improve. But so far, they're a mid-pack type of defense, which is very unusual for Zimmer, but I think that's the reality right now.
Yeah, I think in today's NFL, you can win with a mid-tier type of defense. I think it was almost inevitable just the way the team had been trending. I thought you could see this clear peak in 2017 when you're looking at that roster, and it reminds me of the 49ers a few years ago, 2011 and 12. They had this incredible starting 11 or 12 that they would rotate in there, but you just didn't feel like the depth was there. I felt like Minnesota was kind of hitting that point a couple of years ago, and I think that's why we've kind of seen some of that regression, especially with with Rhodes and Wayne. It's just some of the injuries and various things happening on the back end. So it's not easy, but I think it's doable in today's NFL. And also, I think Zimmer, he's always around a defense that can scheme it up a little bit and make things difficult on the offense. So I think he can always get the most out of his talent. It just puts a lot more pressure on the offense, which of course has been cooking recently.
Steve, Colin Kaepernick plans to audition for NFL teams Saturday in a private workout arranged by, of all folks, the NFL in Atlanta. But only Saturday, not any other day that might be convenient for Kaepernick. But all 32 teams have been invited to watch him. What do you expect to come out of this? Is it just cosmetic, or do you expect something legitimate, some interest to be generated out of this?
I honestly have no idea where it all came from, why the timing is what it is. I'll just say from an on-field football standpoint, there's a more nuanced take than I think most people have had about Kaepernick. I think some people in the media think that Kaepernick would be carrying some team to a Super Bowl, and I think other people think he's terrible. And I think there's somewhere in the middle where the last time we saw him play in 2016, his PFF grade was in the 50s, which isn't great. Yes, he had 16 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. I think he was elevated a little bit by Chip Kelly's offense that particular year. He fumbled a little bit too much. That didn't show up in the stats. But at the same time, I think he's better than most of the backup quarterbacks out there potentially, and I think he could easily be on an NFL roster. So there's some kind of nuanced take in the middle of that. I think he could help an NFL team, assuming everything checks out, assuming he wants to play and all that stuff. So I think teams were showing interest somewhere along the line, and this might be the NFL's way of just kind of letting that happen.
Isn't it interesting, Steve, that we had this whole conversation about how the league figured out Kaepernick and you couldn't have running quarterbacks, and then all of a sudden here we go, and this weekend we've got Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson, a matchup that is about as exciting as one that I can remember in a long time, two guys who would have a good case for MVPs. How do you view the future of the quarterback position? Do you think it'll always be kind of split down the middle to here's your Kirk Cousins who stands in the pocket, but he can throw the ball really well, and here's your more mobile guys who are playmakers? Or 5 years from now, will we have 60% mobile playmakers?
Yeah, I think you'll always be able to win with both. I mean, I've heard other people ask, is this like the death of the pocket passer? And just because Brady's going to retire in 10 years and Breeze might retire soon, I don't think we're losing that necessarily, but Watson and Jackson are interesting because they're different. They're Lamar Jackson, they're using him in the designed running game a lot like, he's closer to Cam Newton as far as how the team is using him. Mm-hmm. Even though Cam was more of a battering ram, Lamar is of course a much shiftier, faster runner, but it's the designed run game of Lamar Jackson versus Watson, who's more trying to create outside of structure. So they're different. They absolutely use their mobility. Much like I mentioned, hey, a play caller is going to get you this baseline of production. I still think you need a quarterback who's going to stand in the pocket and get you this baseline of production. And if he can't get you above that baseline of production, if he can't become Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, then having a guy that can create outside of structure or keep the defense off balance through the design run game and the subsequent play action and opportunities off of that, that's where Lamar comes in. That's where Deshaun Watson and maybe guys who aren't even as skilled as them maybe can extract offense because they are mobile. So I think we'll see a hybrid, and I think we'll see teams that have, say, quarterbacks 20 through 32 perhaps get more creative with more mobile guys in the coming years rather than trying to find the next Breeze, Brady, Peyton, whoever it may be.
Somebody should have signed Josh Johnson again. I think he's played for almost every team with that sort of hope. Who would you rather have, Jackson or Watson?
I would say Watson right now, and it's only because I still feel like Lamar has to prove a little bit in my mind. We talk a lot about accuracy as something you can't really teach, but Lamar has improved his accuracy, whether it's because he's still young and is he's really inexperienced as a quarterback. I mean, he's only been playing the position for about 5 years, so or with real play calls, I should say, because in high school it was a lot of freelancing. So I think Watson has a better track record of things that will continue to translate. Though Lamar, you can build this whole offense around his skill set, and the Ravens are doing that. They're taking advantage of every last bit of his skill set. But I would still say I feel more comfortable with Watson at this point in their careers.
Yeah, I kind of wish this game would have been flexed to national TV so I could watch it because I'll be covering Vikings and Broncos. Steve Palazzolo, one of my favorite follows. I know. Why does the NFL shape its schedule around me and how I want to watch these games?
You'd be happier filling potholes, I'm sure.
I did that once. Yep. That was one of my jobs was road construction. So, yep, I'm happier doing this. Senior analyst at Pro Football Focus, Steve Palazzolo, does a great podcast with our buddy Sam Monson. Always good stuff, Steve. Great to have you on, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Steve.
Yep, for sure. At PFF_Steve is Steve Palazzolo and former minor league pitcher. He's also like 6'7", very tall.